Right, man. Edgar Mitchell. Right, give you a few facts. Born September 1930, died Feb 2016. He was an astronaut on the Apollo 14 mission. There you go. He has a PhDs from aeronautics and astronautics from MIT. So I think it's fair to say not a dumbass as it goes. No. If you're new to our channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. It really helps us out. Why are we talking about him then? Because he's an astronaut. So what?
Common theme amongst the astronauts that they all seem to have made unusual comments about UFOs or the existence of aliens, or the lack of those comments, perhaps in the case of Neil Armstrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Neil Armstrong says his son came out not long ago in an interview and said Neil Armstrong firmly believed in aliens. He was asked in an interview once, "Do you believe in aliens?" And he said, "You'd have to be stupid not to." And he decides whether those aliens are visiting planet Earth. That's a different matter. But
I
mean, NASA said they had to release a statement after Edgar talking a lot about aliens and things, and NASA had to release a statement basically saying we don't monitor aliens. We don't have any UFOs coming into our aerospace. Edgar Mitchell, who is a great American, we just don't agree with him on this subject. So even that was a really polite way of saying, "Oh, sorry, we don't believe in him, but he's a great American." And I think he was a patriot. Right. A lot of these guys, they come out with this, they're either liars, they're mentally unwell, or they're after the limelight. And I don't think you can say about any of these things about Edgar Mitchell. When he speaks, he obviously believes what he says. And he always says he's never seen a UFO himself. He has no experiences himself. And when he talks about these things, he talks about it so passionately. It's hard not to believe what he's saying. So Edgar Mitchell was really interested in the power of consciousness and the mind and all this sort of thing as well.
Yes.
I've got a word, difficult word to start the episode. Merry Christmas. Right, he did a Savik Alpa Samadhi experience, which is a type of meditation. And he was actually on the Apollo 14 mission when he had this experience, right? As soon as he left NASA, Edgar Mitchell established the Institute of Noetic Science and then the Mind Science Institute. He was passionate to find out what the mind was really capable of and what consciousness was capable of. Now, the Stargate project was not just an amazing TV show. It was also a research project funded by the CIA. SRI International was a contractor for the military during this project, and Edgar Mitchell was directly involved. He actually met with George Bush Sr., at the time he was the CIA director, to get more funding. Annie Jacobson, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, actually found out that many of Edgar Mitchell's projects were funded by the CIA. And a lot of these projects were looking into the possibility that things like mind reading and remote viewing could possibly have a military application. We know there was a lot of, through MK Ultra and other things, that there was a lot of research done into remote viewing. They came out and said there was no military aspect, or there was no use to it. It was not useful. But they would say that. I mean, at the end of the day, if it worked, they would come out and say it didn't, and make it go black top secret, wouldn't they? If they suddenly realised this stuff worked.
No, it's very easy to deny research into the fringe stuff as well, because it seems so. It seems so illogical to common people that there's something to it, because of how I suppose society programmed people from a young age. You just don't think that that's possible. Do you know what I mean? Oh, remote viewing. Oh yeah, and just laugh it off.
Yeah, I think that's how they get away with it, though. I mean, the psychology of disclosure for me is that the governments, they don't need to convince us. We're never going to believe them. We're always going to think that there are UFOs and that these things, and that they're lying to us. Mm-hmm. All they have to do is mock the idea and get enough of the population to think it's silly.
Yes.
And enough of the population think it's silly, they don't have to do disclosure.
Exactly. They've managed to do that for 60, 70 years from, Roswell and some of the other crashes that were probably retrieved from the 40s and 50s in the desert in America, and they've managed to basically convince the world that you're in, tinfoil hat wearing nutter if you believe that there might be beings that can travel in crafts from other planets and visit us. When we now know from the Drake equation, what we previously thought was perhaps very few habitable planets, Earth-sized in a habitable zone around their stars in the galaxy. We're now uncovering that actually probably 1 in 5 stars that you look up in the night sky has a Earth-sized planet in the habitable zone with the right temperature for liquid water to pool on the surface. And we've just sent another telescope up now, soon, I think the James Webb one, that's going to be able to detect the atmosphere, like the atmospheric signatures, and actually prove whether these planets have got liquid water or not.
And every few months we keep detecting radio signals that we can't exactly understand. We detected one literally just a couple of weeks ago from our nearest star, and they're saying that the change in frequency of this radio signal they can't quite naturally explain. The only way they can explain the change of frequency is that if the radio signal came from the planet, if it was moving. So I mean, it would be amazing if there was an alien species on our nearest star, that close to us, that was at a similar technology to us. It was sending radio waves. But maybe life's everywhere. We just don't know.
I think that it'd be. I think we're very, naive, thinking that life would only spring up once on this one planet in this vast sea of stars and vast sea of planets in our galaxy alone. Now, traveling intergalactically, that's another thing entirely, is to travel between stars in our galaxy. But this is going well off topic.
No. Edgar Mitchell says that he is certain that 90% of UFOs that we see, that they get reported, genuine ones, the ones that aren't fake or what have you, 90% are from alien species visiting this planet. He genuinely believes that. He genuinely believes that our future and our entire existence is dependent on us as a species stepping out to the stars and joining what he called the planetary community. Some people call it this galactic federation, don't they? That this gets bounded around a lot. But he wants us to step out and jump, because eventually we'll kill our planet. He's a big proponent of renewable future, renewable energies and things like this, and having trying to look after our planet. But he says at some point we're going to burn this planet out, and if we want to survive as a species, we need to join that galactic community. He's a genuine believer in that the universe is full. He's that Star Trek sort of universe where it's full of life, and that's what he genuinely believes, and he argues.
Yeah, and I think I'd probably tend to go with his beliefs. I think that the more the better the science gets, the more we're proving that the universe is probably teeming with life
most definitely
on other worlds. In fact, now I think anybody that thinks the other way is pretty much mocked, looking at the numbers.
Yeah, definitely. It's just whether that's joining us. So, but anyway, we'll leave all the consciousness stuff and the remote viewing and stuff. We'll leave that, because when we do a Stargate project episode, and we'll come back to it. Let's concentrate. So, grew up in Roswell. So now he's a firm believer in that the Roswell incident was an actual crashed UFO. Right? And we've had this channel for 2 years now. And how many times have we mentioned Roswell? We haven't done a Roswell episode. Right? We've only mentioned it maybe twice, which I just think is hilarious. But
probably because it's been done so much by so many different people for 50, 70 years nearly. Well,
it's not much more to say new today, is there? But Edgar Mitchell, he says he grew up in the area, so the locals trusted him. Particularly after the Apollo 14 missions, they considered him a reliable place to speak to, and a local boy sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he says a lot of people spoke to him and told him their stories, like state police, that were ordered to stop traffic along the road that was nearby. And they saw such troops coming and going. He spoke to the funeral director that, built that little coffin that they said was used. And he was really good friends with Jess Marcel, senior and junior, who is the guy that was the first military officer to appear and to get there. And he says he actually had his hands on the ship at one point. He saw a dead body. He saw one of the aliens. He saw the hieroglyphs. This thing about hieroglyphs comes up all the time. You know, you think about Rendlesham Forest.
Yep.
Object hieroglyphs.
Link to that.
Kecksburg, the Kecksburg nut, whatever it was. Even some of the stories about the Nazi bell. It's always this thing shaped like that, thing that they describe as hieroglyphs. All these things. We start connecting all these dots, you know, these things that come up so often. And then
you think about all of our ancient cultures talking about the gods and making us in their image and visiting us from the heavens. It's almost like they might have seeded us with a language like Egyptian hieroglyphs, or even
ancient, more Sumerian, even more ancient. You know,
it's Sumerian.
Our first language was hieroglyphic in nature, and it was, that's what it looked like. So maybe that's, again, like you said, we were either copying what we'd seen or had been given it. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you think about it, an alphabet is kind of not much of an extension to symbols having various meaning. I mean, you can still make sentences out of symbols in the same way you can make sentences out of words. Yeah. So it's not too far off. It's probably simpler as well in order to understand more complex constructs. Yeah, we just evolved it slightly more. Yeah.
I mean, Edgar Mitchell talks about speaking to officials about Roswell. They've confirmed it. He talks about an admiral that he spoke to. He talks about Pentagon intelligence officers that have confirmed the story to him as well. He doesn't give their names, but I think that's probably for good reason, particularly if they're still active. The admiral he talks about quite a lot has now denied it. He said it. But again, maybe it's that because he went a bit too far with what he thought was a private conversation. I do wonder if a lot of people speak to him, don't expect him to actually say anything. He's honest about it, and it's like, Edgar, shut up.
Well, that's what I think happened. I think you got an army officer that was a bit too open and honest to start with, and then the army hushed him up afterwards, and made him redact his statement, and then say it was a weather balloon. What's more likely? He openly made the correct statement, and then the army covered it up, or he made the completely wrong statement about a weather balloon.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about Roswell, you can see it on that guy's face. I know they've come out since and said that it was a weather balloon, but it wasn't the weather balloon we see in the photos because it was part of this experimental device that was trying to track nuclear weapons tests. I want to say Operation Mongoose, but I might be making that up. So, I mean, the Americans, every few years, the American government come out with another, no, Roswell was really this sort of thing. And every couple of years, they make a new one up.
But you're insulting people's intelligence, though, because, a flying saucer traveling at, I don't know, 500 miles an hour, or, maybe even 1,000 or 2,000 miles an hour through the atmosphere and crashing in the desert and obliterating and making a massive crash and a lot of, a long debris trail
carved into the desert. Yeah.
Right. If you're a military officer, you don't mistake a weather balloon for that. Sorry.
No.
It's just not.
How many weather balloons have you seen that hit the ground and cause a crater? It's a balloon. Come on.
It's a balloon. If anything, it will bounce off the ground.
In that famous photo, you can see it in his face. He's picking up the bits of debris and going, what the fuck is this? You can see in his face. It's written all over his face that he's never seen this crap before, and this bit's of tin foil. And he's like, what? Sort of thing. I think it's also it's telling that after the Roswell incident, and then again after the Tic Tac incident more recently, the Americans then shored up a lot of their rules about what army and what soldiers are supposed to do.
The one that said basically, if we do find any artifacts of aliens on, other planets, we won't tell the public because it will scare them too much. And I think that was following Roswell. That's where they tightened it all up in that period, didn't they?
Yeah.
And it all went dark.
10 years that they called the UFO flap, wasn't it? Basically, that included Roswell, included the invasion of Washington. They then had this Robertson report, which basically came out and it also said, we want the CIA to actively get the public to be less interested by this. We don't want the public to be interested, and we want the CIA to actively have a re-education program sort of thing to stop people talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, that was when the cover-up began.
And that they'd hide the truth from us, and then they've been doing it ever since. I honestly don't believe that paradigm has changed. Apart from that, they've now pretty much, in some ways, by releasing those 3 videos from the Pentagon saying, look, we've been tracking this. We think these are metallic objects moving at incredible speeds. We don't know who's controlling them, but they're intelligently controlled.
Yeah.
Right.
Mark my words. I think we're about to have a setup on that. The Salvador Pay vehicle. This vehicle that can go between water and land and is triangular shaped and it's capable of these amazing things. They're going to come out and say that's in operation. It's already started. Carlton Tucker was talking just a couple of weeks ago about a UFO that was seen traveling from water into the air at incredible speeds, triangular shaped object, talking about it on Fox News.
Do you mean Tucker Carlson?
Tucker, what did I say?
Carlson Tucker. Well,
Tucker Carlson. So it's because it's a stupid name. It shouldn't be that way
around. I'll let you off with that one. It doesn't sound right either way around.
It should be the other way around. But yeah, Mr. Tucker, not a first name. The story seems to be building anyway. But anyway, that is off topic. UFOs and Edgar Mitchell. So he says he's always asked, have you ever spoken to other astronauts about this? And now he says, we're going to do an episode soon on the Apollo 11 missions and astronauts that said they've seen things in space, right? But he actually says, he's actually said none of the astronauts he spoke to said they ever saw anything during a space mission. But most of them, or a lot of them, he named Gordon Cooper and a couple of others, says they did see, because they're mostly naval pilots before joining NASA. And
Gordon Cooper was specifically very interesting as well, wasn't he? Because he was a test pilot for the military before he became an astronaut as well. So he was the one that was flying all of the secret jets that they've been developing at Area 51. And so if he sees something that's going faster than anything he's test flown,
when he's seen the best of the best, and he sees something he doesn't understand, then you got to ask questions.
That's pretty much what he said, I think, in an interview somewhere. I've heard him say that.
But what Edgar Mitchell has said basically is that several astronauts that he spoke to saw objects while they were in the military. They were tasked to track or find an object, and they couldn't catch it, or when they did catch it, it disappeared on them. And they saw vehicles move in ways that they don't believe are possible. So, I mean, a lot of these guys had seen something, before they joined NASA. I think that's amazing.
And they're all credible witnesses because they wouldn't have been. They've gone through rigorous training and held high positions of, seniority within, various institutions, and then obviously got a job as an astronaut at NASA. So they're pretty credible. I mean, even Buzz Aldrin's, let slip, hasn't he, before, about he believes in aliens. Right.
So in a 1996 interview, Edgar Mitchell says he spoke to officials from 3 other nations, right? And he says that all these officials from other governments had personal interactions with aliens, right? So there's 2 possibilities with that. He's lying, or our governments and other governments around the world are actually interacting and actually have contact, like active contact with alien species. What do you think?
I think it's quite possible. I think perhaps they made contact after the Second World War, around the late 40s, the early 50s, that period where there were a lot of sightings, and then since then there's perhaps been some kind of agreement in place on, certain protocols, like we won't get involved in their business, or and they don't get involved in ours, or something to that effect. I imagine from probably the biggest government, so the American government, maybe the Russian government could be involved. You'd have to assume it would be them leading.
I think it'd be something potentially that the United Nations is mainly involved in, almost like a tier above the governments. So we'll say, right, this is too important, sort of thing. We have petty squabbles. Have your petty squabbles. Have your little fallouts, but on this level, on something this important, we're going to have one voice. Do you know what I mean? And
maybe you're right, because that you need some kind of mechanism to enable America to control the flow of information, not just within America but globally. So in order to do that, you'd need something perhaps like the UN. So perhaps in like the UN, they do have like those, I don't know, cosmic clearance, like the
Yes.
Majestic 12 in America, where they've got a similar setup. Apparently they do. Apparently America does a lot of the crash retrievals, doesn't it? Even in Canada, Mexico, and even in quite a few of the South American countries, it's been in supposedly recovered crash vehicles. So I imagine they've probably tried to take a lead on it and probably tried to compartmentalize it through the UN. It's probably bang
quite
on.
Possibly, or at least that's the organisational element to it. Where they write the treaties, where they do the planning sort of thing. Because I mean, the UN really is America's in America's back pocket, and they pay for the bulk of it. It's based in America. The United States headquarters is in America. That's not by coincidence, potentially. So
no.
Yeah.
Well, you know me, and a believer in coincidences.
Yeah, I'll give you one or two, but after that,
yeah,
I get suspicious.
Even two.
Yeah, he talks about that the aliens are really interested in our military capability. That's why they see us at White Sands. We see them at White Sands and stuff like that as often as we do. They are interested. That proves to me that I don't see why they'd be interested in our military unless they're interested in sort of making sure we don't destroy ourselves. And he does say they have actively prevented wars between America and Russia, that aliens have actually interceded sort of thing and prevented conflicts.
Well, there's quite a few witnesses that are part of the Disclosure Project, Stephen Greer, that used to work at military bases with nuclear capabilities, that have said that alien crafts have come and hovered over the base and just disabled the entire nuclear facility and just taken them offline. Or they've been, there's one guy on there that said that when they were testing intercontinental ballistic missiles, with warheads, nuclear warheads, armed with them. And he said that the UFO, an unidentified flying metallic object, just flew in above it, zapped it, dropped to below it, zapped it, dropped to behind it, zapped it, in front of it, zapped it, and then it just fell out the sky.
Yeah. There's a case in '59 as well where there was a false launch code sent to some silos in North America. And they were getting ready to launch. They'd fueled the rockets, and they reckon it's the closest we've come to accidentally launching. It was a mistake. It was like a crossed wire at NORAD or something that sent the wrong code. It was supposed to be an exercise, and they sent it like it was real by mistake. And the only reason we didn't end up in nuclear war was the missile didn't fire. They got as far as trying to launch the missile, and it wouldn't. Who knows? Maybe that was ET saving our ass.
Yeah, maybe.
One of the things I find most interesting, and he talks, Edgar Mitchell talks about a cabal. Now, he says that this is only his opinion, but he says there's a worldwide cabal that suppresses the information, and we've heard, New World Order, Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. In lots of areas, we seem to see this idea of almost a secret government, almost like a worldwide federal government sort of thing, or a body that
Well, yeah, they're pretty much
secretly runs things. Yeah,
it's a world of predominantly the world's banking families, but other things as well, big industries, oil, certain things, and they pretty much 200 families do pretty much own most of the world's wealth and run the world.
We know they meet regularly. We know all this, don't we? So they have like little weird parties where they pray to owls and things. But the interesting thing I thought was Edgar Mitchell says that they used to share and brief presidents up until JFK, and they stopped after JFK. Now, I've heard other rumours that JFK was interested in potentially disclosing what they knew about UFOs. It's 10 years after the UFO flap. He'd potentially gone and seen UFOs at Area 51 and actually been fully briefed. And it was the last time any president was, because then he thought it was too big and the American people should know. He said it was too big a secret. Knowing what we know about JFK, I can kind of believe that. And then he was assassinated, and everybody around him was assassinated. His girlfriend was assassinated. His brother, Teddy Kennedy was assassinated. JFK Jr. was assassinated. allegedly.
I think JFK caused them too many problems, and that's what led to his assassination. Whether it was related to what he knew about UFOs and what he was going to disclose, whether it related to the fact that he wanted to try and close the CIA, or the fact that he wanted to try and close the Federal Reserve Bank and create a standard gold-based currency that wasn't loaned to the American government by a private bank. I think it was probably a combination of the three. And I think the powers that be, the ruling banking class, decided from that point onwards that the president's a temporary employee and is not going to be told about these things. If he finds out, fair enough, but he's not going to be briefed.
I think that JFK actually has a president that actually tried to put the American people first, and they didn't like that. I wonder which one of the different things, though, was the final straw, you know? I wonder if it's like, he's talking about aliens. Okay, that's the last straw now. Or was it the CIA? Or was it, which one was the final one to go, okay, we need to actually get rid of this
sharing
guy
it
now.
all with Marilyn Monroe as well. That probably didn't go very well either. That's probably why she ended up dead.
Yeah, quite probably. The last thing I was thinking about, Edgar Mitchell again talks about quite a lot, is that aliens have shared sonic engineering technology with humans, with us, and that the American government are using it. So I Googled sonic engineering, right? And what we understand as sonic engineering is using sound waves, and we seem to use it a lot for testing. So, if you've got like a pipe network, you use sonic waves or pressure through liquid.
Yeah.
Again, same difference. To sort of test for weakness and things like this. But when we've done other technology or the other episodes, we've talked things about like ancient technologies and being able to use sonic, or was it the cones things that we talked about once, using sound waves and things to move really heavy objects and stuff that we think is an alien technology that might have been used on Earth. I think it was the Anunnaki we were talking about when we first talked about that. That again just pricked my ears up, and it's sort of like, okay, he says it quite like it's nothing really, and he doesn't really go into a lot of detail about it. But then I'm like, how many times have we heard about this sort of technology, particularly in ancient times, about using sort of sound waves and things for all sorts of technologies, and
exactly, yeah. Could sonic engineering, it could explain how they built the caves at Derinkuyu. Massive, was it 10 level underground complex with air ventilation. That might have helped to do some of that, or using sound to lift some of these megalithic blocks.
Exactly. I mean, even if you're going as far as the pyramids, the one in South America.
Oh, Puma Punku.
I believe. I want to hike there. It's amazing. I really want to go there. But you see, it
is about 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet above sea level there as well. So then when you realise that they've got 40 ton, and maybe even up to 80 ton stones there. How the hell did they get them 7,000 feet above the sea?
Never mind how did they didn't carve them and do all these intricate shapes that look like they're perfectly straight.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that in the pyramid.
There's some of the best evidence of machine tooling, I think, at Puma Punku, without a doubt.
Yeah, I was thinking. Have you seen the it's like it's a hole in the pyramid, and it's from, I think it's in a star comes up to it. I think it's part of like a calendar system or something. But it's this perfectly bored hole, laser straight through all the stones. And how on earth did they do that? I've no clue. They must have built the pyramid and then drilled it somehow. It's the only way to have done it. They can't have done it during construction.
They didn't have drills.
But how did they do it then? That's what I mean.
Well,
they can't have done it during
something fundamentally is wrong with our understanding of what they were capable of doing, or the equipment that they had, or who built them, or it's just something in our current understanding is not right, obviously.
Yeah, but again, like I say, Edgar Mitchell makes this quite flippant comment about it in a way.
Yeah,
I've seen several interviews with him. He mentions it, but he doesn't go into a lot of detail. But then my mind's just going, "Whoa, no, wait, that connects dots."
Yeah, but if he's known about it for like 40 years, it would be quite a flippant comment from him.
Potentially, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? This is old news to him. He knew about this back in the 70s. When.
But I mean, I think that's just his style, though, isn't it? The way he talks about this stuff, he's quite calm. He's matter of fact about it, and he's just sort of like, I know this, this, and this. And believe me or don't believe me, sort of thing. He's, and that's to me why he's so incredibly believable. I'm gonna put a clip of him at the end of the video. So if you've not seen him speak, go and have a look, and then you honestly tell me that this man is a liar. You could say he's mentally unwell. He believes this stuff, and it's just made up. Okay, I can't argue with that. People lie. People are unwell. People make stuff up. They say things they believe, and they're insane. Somebody. I've met a man who thought he was Jesus, and to talk to him, he was 100%. Like, I'm Jesus. And that's it. I'm the second coming. He was mentally unwell. I hope, or I've missed an opportunity.
Well, you're going to hell.
I could have got in there, couldn't I? Damn it!
It's one of the two.
Put a
Probably would have been better to hedge your bets on that one with him,
just in case. But I mean, he was 100% convincing. Sometimes you watch and you were talking to him, you're like, oh, geez, God, he's really. But he believed it. That's why he was convincing, because he believed it. Maybe, and I can't say. He's very quick to say he's never seen anything himself. But he goes by what he's been told, and he gets told the same thing by lots and lots of people. And Roswell being a prime example of that. A lot of people have told him the same thing, and he's put those dots together. And so, what do you think then?
Yeah, well, I think he's a very interesting individual, and I don't think he's a credible person.
You don't think he's a credible person?
No, I do think he is.
Okay.
So it's you tend to have to believe what he's talking about. It's just some quite incredible, statements.
I'm the same with this with Bob. It's the same thing. Bare minimum, he believes what he's saying. It's the bare minimum. He believes it. I'm always a little careful because I want to believe it. So I'm always a little bit careful when it's anything I want to believe. I always have to second guess myself and double check myself. But he may be one of the most reliable sources I think we've got, and one of the sources that is the most interesting, and it's really hard to dismiss him.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right. If you're new to our channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, see all of our old videos. That'd be great. Really helps us out. Thanks so much. I'm going to do that again. It was shit.
In aeronautics and astronautics from MIT, selection to the NASA Apollo program, selection to a NASA Apollo program moon mission, selection to a NASA Apollo moon mission egress from the capsule on the moon, returning to our world to write several books, found the Institute of Magnetic Sciences, develop a number of scientific exploration initiatives. A man who's received far more awards than I could possibly list here, but which do include the Presidential Medal of Freedom nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize and a number of honorary doctorates. And he has some things to say to you this morning. I would like him to come forward now. Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much for being here. My story with regard to the disclosure process is very simple. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, the site of the first UFO crash, the alleged UFO crash. And my story is as a result of growing up there. I was a senior in high school, just going into my senior year in 1947, when on one day the Roswell Record announced that an alien craft had crashed, and the next day changed that story and said no, the Air Force said that was a weather balloon. And since I was on my way to college and more interested in those things, I didn't pay much attention to it at that point in time. However, my family was in the agribusiness. My grandfather was a cattle buyer, and sold registered Hereford bulls to the ranchers in the area, knew everybody in the area, in the Pecos Valley and beyond, sold cattle into Arizona, western Texas, and was affectionately known as Bull Mitchell in those parts. And so it was not unsurprising to me later on that the lore of the area, of our friends and the people in Roswell, including the sheriff's department, and a military friend of ours, a major, who was also turned out to be
Get the Amazon app and shop on the go, wherever you are. Track your parcel.
Friend of Jesse Marcel, who was the first Air Force officer on the site of the crash. And this Air Force officer was in administration. He was not really involved, but he eventually told me his story, and that's how I became involved. So after my Apollo flight, I did very little. I knew nothing but the lore of the region up until that point. But after my Apollo flight, when I was back in the area and visiting relatives and friends, some of the people in the area who had been involved, what I call the old timers, who were involved in the 1940s, 1947, and subsequent with the Roswell crash, and people like in the sheriff's department who had been to the crash site and were supervising traffic. My friend and friend of our family, the major, who was an office mate of in the administrative function at Walker Air Force Base. These folks, because they had been shushed and told not to talk about their experience by military authority in those days, and on dire consequence if they did, felt that here in the 70s, many years later, that they didn't want to go to the grave with their story. They wanted to tell somebody reliable. And being a local boy and having been to the moon, they considered me reliable enough to whisper in my ear their particular story and their association with the Roswell crash, including the family of the undertaker who provided coffins for the alleged alien victims, and others on site who had been involved or knew the story. And of course, eventually I ran into Jesse Marcel Jr., the son of the Jesse Marcel, who was the first military officer on the site, and knew his story, and knew his story well, and we became friends in later years in this disclosure movement. And at some point, about 10 years ago, and I can't remember what date it was right now, when the disclosure movement was going strongly, I came here to Washington with a man by the name of Will Miller and Dr. Stephen Greer, and we were able to get an appointment at the Pentagon to talk about what we knew, or what we allegedly knew, what we thought we knew, and went and told our story. And the powers that be at the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff listened to our story and said, the Admiral said, well, I don't know that story. I don't know that that's true, but I will find out. So we departed, went on our way, and subsequently learned through Dr. Greer and through Will Miller, and that those stories had been confirmed, and that the Admiral had been denied access when he tried to get into the inner workings of that process. And we had confirmation of that, although that Admiral now denies the fact that this is the fact. So my story is essentially that. I do have no first-hand experience with the ET effort, except the fact that I know all of these research people that you'll hear from today, and some who are not here today, who have spent a long amount of their lives and time doing research into the alien visitation UFO crashes and so forth. And I urge that those who are doubtful read the books, read the lore, and start to understand what has really been going on, because there is no doubt we are being visited. And as a person who is a part of the first generation of being a spacefarer of our civilization and having gone to the moon, and realizing that I do and many of us do now that have seen the Hubble pictures from space, the universe that we live in is much more wondrous, exciting, complex, and far-reaching than we were ever able to know up to this point in time. And the fact we have wondered, were we alone in the universe forever? Only in our period do we really have evidence, no, we're not alone. We are just one planet with intelligent life on it, and probably it is time, now that we are spacefarers on our planet, that we get active, because we're really universal beings. And in the long stretch of things, if we think about it in the longest possible range, we realize, and I realize this from my studies in astronomy and astrophysics, our sun will burn out in due course, and we have to be off this planet if our species is to survive. So anybody, any species, any planet that is on around a mainstream star like ours is, only has a finite amount of time on that star before it burns out. And so our destiny, in my opinion, and we might as well get started with it, is become a part of the planetary community of nations, of planets, just like when we were much newer on this planet, and we found tribes over in the next valley or across the next mountains, and we started forming communities then and reaching out beyond ourselves. At this point in human history on this planet, we're now starting, and ready should be, to reach out beyond our planet and beyond our solar system to find out what is really going on out there. And the 20th and 21st century that we now live in, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution really didn't take off until the 19th century. And I tell the story to some of my younger audiences, particularly in schools, that my great-grandparents went across from South Georgia to West Texas in a covered wagon at the end of the Civil War in the 1870s. My family, my father's generation, was involved with going off the planet in aircraft. And less than 100 years later, I went to the moon. So some covered wagons to going to the moon in less than 100 years is a history of the development of our civilization in not our lifetime, but a couple of generations. And so it's time to start thinking in those terms. And particularly since now, in the 20th and 21st century, we suddenly find that due to our expertise and our genius in science and technology, we have exploded our population from under 2 billion at the beginning of the 20th century to over 6.5 billion at this point. And our consumption patterns are clearly indicating that we are utilizing our non-renewable resources at an unacceptable rate, a non-sustainable rate. So we've got a lot of thinking to do about what being an advanced civilization really means. But let's put all that aside for a moment, because we're here to talk about disclosure. And what I am suggesting is it is now time to put away this embargo of truth about the alien presence. And I call upon our government to open up, like other governments have, and you will hear about that this morning, like the Belgians have, the French have, the Brazilians have, the Argentines, the Mexicans have all released their files. It's about time now that we do the same thing and become a part of this planetary community that is now trying to take our proper role as spacefaring civilization. Thank you very much for your attention.
right now. Would any of the media like to ask either of these gentlemen a question at this point? Any of the reporters?
Yeah.
Alan?
Can you tell us, Dr. Mitchell, exactly what the locals of Roswell told you, if you could remember specifics?
On the mic.
Yeah.
The essence was that the Roswell event was an alien craft, that it was not of this planet. That's the essence. What they really told me was their particular, each one had some particular part of it, like a sheriff's deputy was controlling traffic but heard from what the other people what was going on. The family of the undertaker told about the small coffins that were created for the alien bodies. And my Air Force family friend said yes, he had heard the same thing from Major Brazel. And each one of them just told what their portion of the activity was all about. So putting it all together, the sum total was, yes, it was an alien spacecraft.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question?
Just had another question about
Sure.
fellow astronauts talking to you about seeing space, UFOs in space.
No, I have talked to all of the astronauts up through the Apollo program. And the only ones that have had UFO experience were in their Air Force careers, where were vectored to chase a UFO, never quite made it, couldn't quite get them in their sights or whatever. And that was Deke Slayton, and Gordon Cooper had his experience that's been well recited about seeing one land at Edwards Air Force Base, seeing the pictures of it, suddenly the pictures disappeared into the vaults of Washington and never returned. But the military people that had UFO experience were in their Air Force careers before the astronaut program. And of course, being a military and Navy pilot myself, the stories among airline pilots and other pilots is they're just all over the places. And we're all told, shut up about it. I never chased one myself, but all my friends that did, where it was all the same thing. Don't talk about it.
Thank you.
I'm not going to do it while you're swishing your tea round.
Well, no, I know. I figured I might as well finish it before we start.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's enticed to swig down, am I? In the middle of it.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, people getting accusing you of pretending to drink a tea, which is still our best trolling comment.
It's like,
why would you drink tea? Why would you be doing that?
If there's anything as well that you don't really need to pick apart, it's like someone drinking
tea.
Yeah.
I was tempted to go to code, mate. To code, like QAnon thing. You know, like when Trump was drinking water, I never thought it was a code.
Get this Reddit post.